What is up, you guys? Welcome back to the Alchemical Life podcast. It's your host, Abigail Crow, and I'm here to chat with you guys about a couple of things. I've got a little bit of edumacation that I'm going to throw you away, and then we're also going to answer a few questions that you guys asked. I threw out a Q&A this afternoon. I really gave nobody any notice to shoot me questions, but gonna answer a few questions that got asked in the hour that I put out the Q&A. But first, we're gonna talk about something that I think that a lot of runners struggle to manage, and it ends up discouraging them from doing any kind of strength training to begin with, and that is how to schedule your lifts and runs for maximal performance, right? How much time, what's the order, with the frequency, the training intensity, the season. How do we structure all these things depending on all of these different variables? Well, if you have those questions, I have answers. I've got you. And before we get into this, like this video, subscribe. If you're very interested in some good solid programs, then I've got programs for sale, some return to sport, some in season, and some in a build season or an off season. For runners, they have everything. They have the actual training program. They have a training log to record everything. Everything is video linked. All of them have come with a modification list, so you can modify up or down depending on, if you're more or less advanced. And everything has a cueing log, so if you need more guidance on how to do the exercise, you essentially get a personal trainer in your pocket. It's all there. It's $50. It's super worth it. Check them out. They're awesome. When you purchase, you'll get everything sent to you immediately. So appreciate you. Now that I'm done paying the bills, let's get into it. So, how to schedule your lifts in order to have maximal performance. We'll try to get through this pretty quickly. I think that the first question is, well, all right, how many days per week do I even lift, right? A lot of runners are running anywhere from 4 to 6 days per week, which is a very, very high training frequency. And if you are running that frequently, then you have to be very strategic in how you incorporate any kind of strength training whatsoever. I think it's important to still incorporate. I think it needs to be something that is incorporated, but how much and how do we do it? This is what we're going to talk about. So first, how many days per week do you need to be strength training? I think that if you're in season, 2 to 3 is very sufficient. Also, what goes on in the training session is going to depend on if you're in or out of. I always say out of season in quotes because I feel like no runner's really out of season, but just in a phase where you're building a little bit more. You don't have any kind of A races coming up, and if you're in school running, you're not in school season. So 2 to 3 if you're in season. If you're not in season, you can get away with 3 or 4. And that's if you're during a build season or an off season, right? Now, how many exercises do I need to be doing? Like in each training session, how long should this take? How many exercises do I need to be doing? If you are in season, actually, you can get away with a little bit more. And here's why. So if you're off season, 4 to 5 is plenty. And this is because when you're in off season or you're in a build season or you're in a phase where you're okay with potentially placing a little bit more intensity and effort and energy into your training session, right? And it might take away a little teeny bit from your runs, or you have a little bit more intensity from your runs to now give toward your strength training. 4 to 5 exercises is plenty. This is because when you are out of season, again, I say this in quotes because are you ever really? Or during a build phase, you can get away with more compound lifts, more heavier weights, doing a little bit more high intensity training. So literally relative intensity, like you are closer to a maximum. So we're going a little bit lower rep. We might be going a little bit heavier weight. You might be doing more compound lifts. So overall loadability is just higher. That is something that in season you might not be able to do as much. So in season, you'll probably be incorporating more drills. You'll be incorporating exercises that have maybe higher stimulus but lower overall fatigue. So things like oscillations and isometrics, things like that. You can venture more into actually the 6 to 10 range in terms of exercises, because oftentimes I'll be throwing supersets at my clients during those times, We might not do 3 sets. We might only be doing 2 sets just so that we can move into positions. We can reinforce certain positions, train certain functions, and then go from there. When you are this kind of all assimilates into the how hard and what's the relative intensity, right? Because when you are in season, you're looking for big rocks, right? One tough lift maybe, just so that we're still trying to maintain some strength that we've built during whatever previous block we were in. And then you just want, again, what I was saying before, high stimulus, low fatigue. What does this mean? It means that we're getting stimulus, we're targeting we're getting the intent out of the training session we want, so we're hitting the function of certain muscles, and we're also driving some stimulus to the regions that we want to, but we're not accumulating an immense amount of fatigue. And this is because we're either adding in complexity, or we might be changing the overall movement pattern a little bit so that overall loadability is just naturally lower, right? For example, in season, or here out of season, I might be doing a barbell front squat. Okay, you can load that pretty heavy. Versus in season, I might have my client do a goblet squat. There's only so heavy that you can load that. In off season, I might have my client do a barbell bent over row. Whereas in season, I might have them do a dumbbell chest supported row, or a cable lat pullover, or a superset of both. So in a barbell bent over row, you're getting a hinge. There's a big compound lift going on. We're rowing a lot of weight in a hinged position. This might not be something that's necessarily ideal in a very high intensity training block, or when we're super in season and running. So because of that, I might have them do a dumbbell chest supported row, because now we have the hinge removed, and there's not as much co-contraction involved in the lift, and so they can still get a good position in terms of we're working the upper body, we're training the we're still moving through around the rib cage through the scapula, and we're not generating too much fatigue via high levels of co-contraction and in being in a hinge position. If I still want to reinforce some of a hinge, but I want to do it in a little bit of a less intense way, then you can do a cable lat pullover, right? You're in a hinge position, but overall we've got an externally stable cable we're hanging on to, and we're pulling with the lat that way. So those are kind of examples as to how we can shift and change off-season versus in-season training to reduce overall intensity and load, and still get and drive intent out of the training session. Another example of this would be doing, instead of a rear foot elevated split squat with 2 dumbbells, I might have them hold 1 dumbbell contralaterally, and we might do a rear foot elevated split squat oscillation. So not doing a full repetition, we're just kind of hovering toward the bottom, maybe doing like a 2/3 repetition. We're oscillating for time or for a little bit higher repetition. This is going to overall decrease loadability. You're still going to feel a freaking burn like crazy, but it's not going to drive as much fatigue. It's just going to drive a lot of stimulus, and we're still going to be reinforcing those positions. So we'll still be working on late stance mechanics. We'll still be working on, getting length in the back, in the quadricep. We're still going to be working on strength and internal rotation. We're still going to be working on our core. We're still going to be working on stacking rib cage over pelvis. We're still going to be working on all these different positions that we want to get out of the movement, but we're not necessarily, loading the shit out of it and doing a super, super heavy dumbbell rear foot elevated split squat so that you go into your run and you're super tired. Or potentially you've come from your run and you're really, really hurt. And that's something that we're going to talk about next, actually, which is when in the F in my training week do I even do my lifts, okay? Because if you're running 4 to 6 times per week, and then you're trying to do 2 to 4 potentially lifts per week, that's just like, that math is not mathing, right? So 2-a-days are going to be likely 2-a-days are just going to be necessary when it comes to runners and what you're doing and what you're wanting to do. Every study ever will say that ideally, if you're trying to do, get the most benefit from your stuff, you want to be able to have the training sessions performed on separate days. Why I don't necessarily like this is because in an ideal situation, to maintain and keep strength and hypertrophy and aesthetics, then yes, you want to be able to separate your cardio and your lifting. But with the sport of running is the most important thing, and then lifting is an asset to the thing to running, to the sport itself. So when you go about your training week, if you're trying to constantly, one, wait for a rest day, you'll just never really get it to lift. And two, I think that in turn ends up leading to people having kind of just a fully intense training weeks, and we actually decrease recoverability because we're trying to separate our runs and our lifts so much. And I'll break this down a little bit more. So when I talk to clients about, or when I've given seminars and I talk to people about when the heck do I find a lift and when do I come and book with you and whatever, I actually like for my clients to come in, especially in season, on their hard run day, and I like for them to come in after their hard run. Now, if they're in off season or build season, maybe there might be room to say, hey, come in and lift first. But oftentimes, if running is the thing that we are training and running is the most important thing, then running, that thing needs to be done first. And why I like to have them do the run and then the lift afterwards is because, now, caveat, I do like for clients to break it up with a few hours of rest and a meal in between. So I don't necessarily like for them to come in from a hard run and then just immediately lift. That's not ideal. I like for them to run, rest, eat, hydrate, and then come in and lift. Ideally with several hours of separation in between the two. Why I like to do this is because I want to be able to stack intensity. I want the hard run and the lift to be on one day. We have a very high intense day so that throughout the week, when you have your easy run days, they can truly be lower intensity days. And your rest days that you have can truly be rest days. Because what will happen is if you're doing a really hard run day and then you have an easy run and then a lift, what's going to happen is your hard run day ends up being pretty dang intense. And then your easy run day, which is supposed to be a lower intensity day, combined with the lift ends up being a medium to higher intensity day. So now you're stacking intense days. And then you have maybe another easy run, then you have one easy day, and then you go back into your hard run, and a lot of the time people won't feel fully recovered. They go back into their hard run day and they're like, dude, I had nothing to freaking give. And it's because what was happening is you were stacking too many intense days because you weren't maneuvering your strength sessions around properly, and so thus you were coming in a little bit more under recovered or sore or just feeling the central nervous system was just not firing properly, right? Like your body just did not feel ready or prepared, and that's not ideal. So when you are choosing to lift, whether it be in season or out of season, honestly, especially if you're somebody that's running closer to the 6 days a week and you're also lifting closer to the 4 days a week, you're just going to have to stack intensity. So on those harder run days, I would do your lift, and then on the easy days, do the easy stuff, and then on the rest days, do the rest stuff. Really try and keep your high intensity days, your low intensity, and your rest days. That being said, what training split do I do? Oftentimes, if I have my clients doing 2 to 3 training sessions per week, they're full body. We might have an upper or lower bias depending, but oftentimes they're full body. The one time is if you're doing a 4-day a week lift split, you could potentially get away with an upper lower split. I do love upper lower splits. That being said, when you're doing your upper lower split, I would combine your high intensity days and your lower body days together, and then your easy run days and an upper body day together. Because upper body should overall be of a lower intensity. They should not be things that you necessarily concern yourself with as much. They should not matter as much. Your lower body days and then obviously your hard run days are going to be things where you're really like hitting the freaking weights. Or we're just moving into positions, or we're getting a little bit uncomfortable. We're generating quite a bit of stimulus to the lower body. So that being said, I would keep, if you're doing an upper lower split and you're doing let's say you're doing 3 days a week, but you want to do 2 lower, 1 upper, okay? Then I would have your 2 lower body days stacked with a high intensity day, and then your 1 upper body day stacked with an easy run day, and then still keep your rest days rest days. That's the one thing I would not change. Your rest day needs to be your rest day. You should not be lifting on your rest day. Your rest day should be full rest. Go on walks in the freaking sauna, chill, hang out with your family, kiss a dog. Rest days are for rest, okay? Now that we've talked about that, we have a few questions here that I'm going to answer on this podcast. One, shout out to my man, Christopher, dude. I love him. He asks so many questions. This man's like also so supportive and kind. He like shares all of my stuff. Shout out, Chris. First question is, how do you determine your athlete's needs for sport? This is a question that it doesn't necessarily just go to athletes. It's kind of everybody. I look at the person who's in front of me, what's their health history, what's their training history, what is their sport, what positions do they suck at getting into, what positions are they great at getting into, what positions do they just hate doing, what do they love doing, you know. It's kind of the whole psychosocial approach to training, which is like, who are they? What is their physiological, like, what are their physiological capabilities? What are they coming to me with? What's their history? Psychologically, what are their strengths and weaknesses? Socially, what are their strengths and weaknesses? Physiologically, right, what are their strengths and weaknesses? And when I can delineate those things down, then that's what I'm going to determine they need. Now, it always honestly distills down to like a push-up and a hinge and a pull and a upper body and a lower body and a core and a, you know, some unilateral movement and some bilateral movement. It kind of all delineates down to the same, what we would consider in quote the same X's and O's, but the why behind how I load it, what order I put it into, what days we do it, how heavy we're going, you know, like all of those things are going to depend on the person in front of me. And it's less about necessarily the athlete and the sport, because athletes and their sports, they're essentially like they all kind of need similar things. There's going to be differences, especially as we approach closer to season, in terms of what positions we're moving into and things that we're going to emphasize in the training room. But generally speaking, they all kind of need the same thing. So I focus less on necessarily like who this athlete and their sport, and more on like who are they, what specific position are they in, and what are they really good at and what are they really bad at, and historically, who are they and where do they want to go, and that kind of thing. I hope that was a good question or a good answer. I don't know if I answered that very well. But next question was from my man Colin, and he asked, what is the best path for someone wanting to do athletic training as a career? This is not the question for me. If you want to become an athletic trainer, you need to go to college. I mean, I did go to college, but that's you got to go the collegiate route. And so if you're wanting to go into actual athletic training, then you have to get a degree in athletic training. And I believe you have to get a master's in athletic training and probably do a lot of interning, some sort of internship. So boring, but you got to do that. If you mean athletic training as in personal training and coaching, then the best path, man, is just fucking get a certification and start running that floor and make a lot of mistakes and work with a lot of coaches and ask a lot of questions. Don't expect to make much money at first. Don't do it for the money, because if you're doing this for the money, then this is the worst industry to be in of all time. Like, if I was just doing this for the money, I would not be here still. I would have done another job. Like, I would not be doing this job. But yeah, ask questions, get out there, just help people. Seriously, just operate in service to others, and I guarantee you that somebody's going to want to give back to you when you give as much as you do to the people that you're trying to help, and success will come from it. And that's it. I think that this other person, this was the same question asked over and over again. So I only had 2 questions, LOL. That's hilarious. But yeah, that's generally how I would structure for my clients, what I would recommend in terms of how to structure your running and your lifting. And those are also the couple of Q&A questions that I got. I'm just going to be sad because I always end up filming and then I get like 5 more questions. So I will offset them to the next Q&A that I do. But that is it. I think that I have for this week. Let me know if there's any topics you want to hear me discuss. I have a bunch of topics that I want to talk about all the time, and I write them out, and they're all in the podcasting bank of future podcasts to make. But if there are topics that you guys want to hear about that you all have not heard yet, then let me know, and I can do that for you. I'm thinking the next few episodes are going to be series based on a seminar that I gave on common myths when it comes to strength training for endurance training, for endurance runners, and why those myths are myths, and why endurance athletes need to be strength training. So you can look forward to, or not, that. And then also I'm looking to get a few more guests on here soon, so that'll be exciting. Other than that, I hope that you guys, I don't know, have a great week. I never know how to end these things. Like and subscribe. I'll catch you guys later. Bye.